This is something I spoke about way back in, I want to say maybe the fourth or fifth episode that I did of this series, but bears repeating now, I think, even more than ever, because the last episode had a lot to do with Joel from The Last of Us, and it touches on the emotional gut punch the video games can have, unique to them beyond any other medium you can think of. Don't get me wrong, books can give you an emotional buzz. Music can make you cry. Movies can make you feel something for the characters on screen, but only video games really do all of that in one. They bring it all together in one place, and then they add one extra layer by making you a direct participant in the story. You've got a vested interest in that character, as I said in the last episode, whether that is a character of your own making or if you're merely following the narrative of someone else's journey. You still have a very direct impact in it, and you are guiding them or joining them as they go along this path to whatever the conclusion of the story may be. Sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a mixed blessing, and sometimes, depending on the game, there's multiple endings, multiple variations of what could be based on decisions that you've made both big and small along the way. And sometimes it's the decisions along the way that you didn't even know you were making that end up having the most impact. Sometimes relationships with characters that seemingly were minute end up having a lot of weight by the time the story's finished. And throughout that story, there's going to be moments, emotional highs and lows that leave you feeling something, whether you expected it or not, intentional or not. An easy one to pick off of right off the top would be the beginning of The Last of Us, where you play as Joel, a young father, trying to protect and rescue his little girl from essentially the end of the world, and then later on when he's trying to do the exact same thing for Ellie. There's plenty of examples you can think of. I always bring back up this one at some point, but Red Dead Redemption is another great one where you're following the story of John Marston, who's a man formerly a ruthless criminal, now just wants the quiet life with his family that's been denied to him, largely because of his past, but also because of the changing times. Some other ones that really struck me were Shadow of the Colossus, and it's interesting because it is a game without very much dialogue. There is some conversation, especially between your main character and, I forget the omnipotent godlike spirit in the temple, but it's a very somber, quiet game. The emotional impact from it comes from just how empty the landscape you're venturing through is, except for these massive colossi that you have to take down as part of your quest. But other than that, you'll find yourself traveling through temples, seeing the fallen over altars of some forgotten culture, wandering deserts, valleys, and forests almost entirely void of life. And then finally you come across these giant beasts that are the only things that exist in this forbidden valley you found yourself in. What's another good one? Dead Space. For all the flack that series might get, it had some really good parts, and not just scary or intense or disturbing, but the first one more than any of the others, the psychological impact of not only dealing with the stress of constant death around every corner and air vent, but also this idea, especially near the end of the game, where what you're doing, your goals, the people that have been helping you, even the person you're trying to rescue, may not be there, and everything you're doing may not be quite what it seems. Are they real? If they're not, do these hallucinations have your best interest at heart? And if they're not real, and they are hallucinations, why are you experiencing them? Why are they influencing you? And why are they affecting you this way and not everybody else? If you play the game, you know what I mean. It adds an interesting dimension, which kind of gets diluted as the series goes on, but it leaves you feeling something. And that's really the whole culmination of the idea that I have for this episode, was that games can do it in a way that nothing else can. When you're watching a movie, when you're reading a book, when you're listening to music, you're an active participant, but you're not an interactive participant. You are watching the event. You're sitting on the sidelines and letting it wash over you, however that may be. And sometimes it won't affect you in that way the first time around. There's plenty of times where I've watched a movie and just enjoyed it for what it was, but then the second time I watched it, maybe it was the next day, maybe it was a couple of years from that point, it hits me in a different way. And you could go in depth on whether that's a change in personality, values, life experience, or how you're feeling that day, what you ate. Who knows? Who knows? But video games are unique in the aspect that you have to do something for anything to happen. The story literally doesn't move 1 inch until you pick up that controller, hit that power button, move the mouse, tap the keyboard, I guess manipulate the VR system. You have to do something. You have to literally push start for the story to go anywhere. And that's what's so interesting about it, because without you, as much as I said in the last episode, the title actually was, it's not your story. And a lot of times it isn't. The story can't exist without you. Something kind of interesting to think on. Once again, if you got your own ideas you'd like to share about it, I would be happy to hear them because, man, I could talk for hours about stories, narrative, impact, meanings, characters. If there's one thing I love in a story, it's good characters. I can ride along with a simple story if the characters are super interesting. Or even better if they all crisscross and have these interconnected stories that culminate into something bigger that even the characters themselves may not be realized. This is kind of going off in a tangent, but it's one of the reasons that I love the Guy Ritchie films like Lock, Stock and Two, Smoke and Barrel, Snatch, Rock and Rolla. They're all stories that do a great job of taking a huge cast of characters, and by the time the story's finished, they've all crisscrossed or had something to do with each other by the end. And although it seems kind of like buckshot bullet spread when the story begins, it makes perfect sense by the time everything wraps up. And I'm sure there's plenty of video games that do that as well, but I'm rambling at this point, so I'll leave you with that thought. And until next time, my name's Rye. You guys take care of yourselves.